What's up, Ramblers? I'm back. Do any of you remember that weird movie about that boy in the suit who, never takes off his sunglasses or something? Yeah, that's Artemis Fowl. Well, sort of. I got into my Artemis Fowl rabbit hole last year, I think, and I've been trying to climb out ever since. Just kidding, I like it down here, and I plan to stay as long as humanly possible. Actually, I take that back. I'm not sure if I fell down this rabbit hole last year or the year before. It's a little fuzzy now, but needless to say, I like this topic enough to make a whole video about it. Basically, I'm going to try and give my opinions and thoughts on what could have made the movie better, because if you didn't know, the movie's a mess. But first, let me give you my personal backstory on how I came to know this series. Hopefully, I remember everything correctly. Now, one summer, I decided I'm going to make a reading list and I'm going to read all these books. And there were a few books on the list, and I don't know if you can tell by the types of things that I'm into, but I tend to read a lot of middle grade stuff. It's just so much fun. Anyways, I guess I started my rabbit hole descent in 2020 because I remember seeing a trailer for the Artemis Fowl movie and thinking, that looks kind of weird, but there were also some pretty colors, so maybe I'll give it a watch or something. And then I went on the digital library and found out, oh, there's books. And so I, like the book lover that I am, well, more audiobook lover, but anyway, I decided I'm going to read the book first. And so I did. And I didn't really like it. It was kind of weird. I didn't understand who I was supposed to be rooting for. It was just okay. The writing was good, but I just wasn't in love with it. Then I did a quick Google search and found out that the movie was very poorly received by the book fans and just random people who watch movies, and I decided not to watch it. And I promptly forgot about it. Just kidding. I kept seeing the books all over the digital library, and what really got me was the cover art. They looked so cool and so pretty, and I was like, I could be reading these books and not just looking at them. So I decided to listen to the second book. By the second book, I was totally hooked. I was totally invested with the characters. It was so interesting, and I was a fan. I was in for a wild ride. So finally, I finished the 8 main books and decided not to watch the movie until I changed my mind, because I guess I was curious, and I watched it with a few friends, and I yelled at the TV screen a lot, and they went to sleep actually, and I was stuck awake watching the movie. Which, yeah, it is pretty bad. I think even if I had never read the books or didn't read the books beforehand, I think I would still not like this movie very much. Objectively, I just don't think it's a very good movie. It's very confusing, sloppy, and kind of boring, and I can't imagine coming in with a fresh mind about it. Having not read the books, I probably would have been even more confused. And this movie is already pretty confusing, so that says a lot. Speaking of reading the books beforehand, you might have a better grasp on this video if you have read at least one of the books beforehand. And by the way, there will be spoilers for, I don't know, probably all 8 of the main books. I've only read the main 8. I haven't read Fowl Twins or any of those other books. I will explain some things, but at the risk of rambling. Get it? Did you get it? Okay, good. Okay, so at the risk of rambling, I might leave some things out. So if you're confused, it's probably because I left something out. This is one of those books where you read it and you're like, how did anyone come up with that? How did it get published? This is literally so weird. Why can't I stop reading it? We're going to kick off this video by going through the literature and kind of giving you a rundown of some of the main characters. And then we're going to start talking about the movie, why the movie doesn't work, and then my suggestions on how to fix the movie as a fan who has no screenwriting experience, but a lot of confidence, depending on the day. I will read you the back of what my box set says about the series. Stay back, human. You don't know what you're dealing with. 12-year-old Artemis Fowl is a millionaire, a genius, and above all, a criminal mastermind. Here are his first 6 hilarious and hair-raising adventures involving creatures who live below ground: sprites, elves, trolls, goblins, pixies, and more. Warning, these aren't the fairies of bedtime stories. These fairies are armed and dangerous. I'm also going to read to you the opening line for the first Artemis Fowl book. How does one describe Artemis Fowl? Various psychiatrists have tried and failed. Yeah. Hi. Okay, so I'm editing right now, and I'm just not happy with my summary. I think I can do it faster. So here we go. Artemis's dad is some rich criminal empire guy. He gets on a boat, the boat sinks, and he gets kidnapped by the mafia. Artemis wants to go fund an expedition to go save his dad in the Arctic. But he's out of money, so he goes to track down a fairy Bible to read it to see if he can get gold from fairies. And he drags his bodyguard, Butler, to go do that with him. His mom is not doing the best since his dad left. She's depressed, she's having hallucinations, and she doesn't always remember people. Artemis decides to kidnap a fairy to extort gold from the fairy people. So he does that. He captures Holly, who is a lower elements police recon officer, and it goes awry. There's some fairy law. Fairies are very big on their laws and rules and regulations. There's some law in there that basically says if Artemis outsmarts them, he gets to keep the gold. So he outsmarts them and he gets to keep the ransom money. Now, of course, these fairies have magic. So at the last minute, Artemis, who's starting to feel bad about the whole kidnapping thing a little bit, he goes to Holly and he's like, hey, can I buy a wish from you? So he gives half of the ransom gold back to her for the wish of basically healing his mother's depression and all of her hallucinations and everything that's going on. So she comes out of her room for the first time in months, and she's feeling great. And this is when we find out that it's Christmas Day. This is a Christmas book, guys. Break out the Christmas hats. Every year, we cozy up by the fire and read Artemis Fowl. We don't do that, actually, but we should. I just want to say that there's a bunch of other characters that are pretty important in this whole story, but I don't really have time to touch on them right now in detail. I also want to clarify that fairy is kind of an umbrella term for any of the magical creatures that's underground. I feel like that's important because you might be thinking I'm just talking about a pixie or something. All right, now finally, without further ado, let's talk about the dreaded movie. Sometimes when I'm feeling down and bored, I like to turn on this movie and it makes me mad. Not in a really mad way, but a fun mad like you get when you're watching a terrible movie, and it kind of cheers me up. I know that might not make sense to some people, but some people get it. I get it, and that's all that matters. Anyway, when I was watching the movie one time, I made bullet points of what really irked me about the movie. It is important to note that this movie is basically just trying to tackle the first book, but they did pull a couple of elements from later books, and then of course they also changed a whole bunch of stuff. Hi, editing me again. I wasn't going to talk about the casting for this movie originally, but I feel like I should mention it here. It's such an obvious thing. Okay, so in the books, Juliet and Butler are Eurasian, and that was mentioned several times. So I don't understand why they decided to make them black. And I'm saying this as a black person. I am still confused by this. I feel like maybe they just really wanted that actor, and so then they also changed Juliet so that they looked more family-ish. Not that every family has to have the same skin color, but that's just what I think happened, and it bothers me because I don't understand why they didn't just cast Asian people for this role. And I just don't understand the thought process behind this. And also, if you wanted to cast someone black, you could have casted the role of Holly to a black actress, because Holly canonically has nut brown skin. It's in the books, guys. Also, I feel like Root should still be a guy. I feel like that story was good the way it was. You know, like why? I just have so many questions about this movie. Like nothing makes sense in this entire movie. But I'm going to go ahead and stop with this part and just continue on to the next thing. All right, now I'm going to pull up my notes that I made while viewing the movie one time. And this is in my notes app, and it is titled, How to Not Movie. So you're welcome for that. Telling, not showing. That's a big problem when you're doing a movie. You need to be showing more than you're telling because we can see. They also say this for writers, and it's funny because this is advice for writers and filmmakers, but for filmmakers, they literally have the luxury of giving an actual physical visual to look at. So it's kind of crazy that a movie could mess this up so bad, but they did. Poor character setup. I don't feel like the characters were introduced in the best way. They were kind of just like thrown in. There's an opening narration, and it's just not a good way to introduce the characters. And by the end of the movie, you have no emotional attachment to the characters at all. My third point was that the narration lasted for way too long. They have the Mulch Diggums character, a character that I haven't touched on yet. They have him doing the narration, and it's just so long, and it's just a drag. And he tries to explain things that would be better shown, and it really talks down to the viewer, and it's just honestly annoying. My next point was just like this weird aside is we were 8 minutes in and we still got like a little credit pop up, which I just thought was strange because I feel like 8 minutes by the time we hit the 8-minute mark, I feel like everybody should be credited, but I don't know. That was just a weird aside. It doesn't really like bring down the movie or anything. I wrote still telling, not showing. So it is quite a big problem in this movie. Next, I wrote Artemis should be narrating, not Mulch. I really think this whole thing could have been better if we had Artemis narrating because he is the main character and it could have given us like a head start on learning who he is and the way he speaks and just really let us get into this character because he's quite a complicated character to get into, especially with just such a short amount of time. So this kind of could have been a good opportunity for us to like really delve into his character by him narrating. And he also does make little journal entries throughout the books. So he could have just been like adding to his journal and we could have been reading a journal entry that corresponded with whatever part to the movie, at least in the beginning and in the end, maybe, I don't know. But I just really felt like that could have been better. Like, don't get me wrong, I love the Mulch character, but every time he popped up to do some narrating, I just went, oh, here he goes again, please stop. My next point that I wrote says, goes out of its way to contradict the book. This is annoying to me because a lot of the changes they made just didn't really make sense. You know, if you're going to change something, have a good reason. That's basically what this point is about. My next point is Artemis saying his dad isn't a criminal with a laughing face. I just thought that was funny because in the books, he knows his dad is a criminal and he's like really proud, basically. Like he wants to follow in his dad's footsteps, and if his footsteps are, you know, on the other side of the law, he is prepared to follow those footsteps. So I just thought that was funny. Next, we don't see Artemis being smart. We really don't. We're told that he's smart, but like kind of in a quirky way where Artemis he's quirky, but he's not like quirky, if that makes sense. Like he has his quirks, but he's just a very logical person. Like he's that kind of nerd, not like a geeky kind of nerd. He's very stilted in his speech. He's very formal. And the way that they showed Artemis in the movie was just like, he's this goofy little kid. Nobody really gets him. And, you know, and he does smart things, but we still don't really see him do like any problem solving in the movie. So I would have liked to see that. That really would have helped the character. The next point is Mulch keeps talking. He needed to stop. Next, why isn't the news written in Gnomish? That's a really nitpicky thing, to be fair, but you know, it could have been written in Gnomish. It wasn't, I don't think it was saying anything important. Next is editing. There's this like weird editing part. There's a couple of weird parts like that.
I can't really explain it without showing it to you.
And then the next thing is nonsensical slow-mo shot. There's just a really weird slow-mo shot that's just kind of wedged in there while Foley is typing or whatever, doing the time stop or whatever. And it's just kind of weird. It looks strange. Every time I see it, I think it looks strange. In the part of the movie where Commander Root comes up and the door goes down and it zooms in and she goes, top of the morning. There's in the back, there's Gnomish, but I'm pretty sure it says MCU and not LEP, and I don't understand that. Like, why doesn't it say LEP? Like, am I missing something? Did they just pick random letters? Or were they trying to make a little MCU joke? That's a very interesting joke to me. Like, I just didn't get that. Maybe they did that on purpose. Maybe they were trying to be like, ha ha ha, Marvel. But yeah, I don't know. Root says, nice try to Artemis when he says for her to come in. Like, he says, oh, you have permission to enter my house or something like that. And Root says, nice try, which doesn't make any sense because that's one of the fairy laws. Like, if he hadn't invited her in, then she can't come in. And if she comes in, she will get very sick. So I don't understand why she was being so sassy. Like, nice try. Like, he literally has to do that. The next note is from the end of the movie. It says in quotes, I'm a criminal mastermind. Yeah, it's just a weird line. I'm sure there's a bunch of other problems that I didn't even mention in this movie, but we're just going to move on into why I think they struggled so much with this movie, at least from like a character standpoint. Artemis is a really complicated character. He starts off like really just acting like a really bad person, and then over time throughout the series we see him like wrestle with guilt and then slowly turn into someone who's working on themselves and really trying to make the best out of the circumstances that they're in. And yeah, he's not gonna win any awards for being most upstanding citizen, but you see that he's starting to really think about the consequences to his actions, and he does care about his friends and his family a lot. Now, of course, in a book series, you have basically hours and hours and hours to really delve into a character, whereas in this movie, we barely have 2 hours. So basically what I'm trying to say is, it seems like the writers ran into this terrible issue of, oh no, our protagonist is unlikable. And yeah, he's kind of supposed to be like that. In book 1, he's a total jerk. Like, you do see that he has some sense of guilt, and you see that he really is trying to help his family in some way, but it doesn't excuse all of the other terrible things that he's done. And like I said, he does get better eventually, but for this movie, we're basically just working off of the first book, with some exceptions, of course. But we're basically using the first book, in which our main character, our protagonist, is a total jerk. So what do? We can't make the audience start to actually like this character because we don't have enough time to see a convincing transformation from a jerk to a kind of okay guy. So what do? We change the character. And I do want to clarify, like, Artemis in the movie still does some pretty crappy things, but it's still not the level that it was at in the books. And I'm not really saying like, oh, make it gritty and dark and edgy because I like gritty, dark, edgy things. I'm just saying the character is like diluted in a way that just doesn't make him convincing or endearing. So now that I've kind of told you the main problems with the movie, I'm going to go into how I would propose we fix this situation. First, I'm just going to give 2 suggestions, I guess. Something that we could have done instead of what we did do, and then I'm actually going to dive into the movie and tell you kind of beat by beat what I would have changed. So my first smaller solution is to make the movie that we made, sort of, and just have Holly be the protagonist. This book is unique in that it kind of has two protagonists. Like, Artemis is the main character, but Holly is kind of also the main character. And we're kind of rooting for both of them in a strange way. Like, we want to see Holly succeed, and we realize that she's in a terrible situation, but we also want Artemis to get what he wants in a way, because we want him to have a family again. We're rooting for both of them, even though they're kind of pitted against each other. It's a really interesting dynamic. And I know that could be kind of weird, because if you're still going to call it the Artemis Fowl movie, it'd be weird to have Holly be the main character. And if you changed it to the Holly short movie, that would also feel kind of weird. But I don't think I would be mad if it was still called the Artemis Fowl movie, but it was kind of more focused on Holly, and maybe that would have cleared up some of the issues they had with just an unlikable protagonist. Another idea I have is to just make a series. I know it's not that easy. I know you can't just say, oh yeah, let's make a show, and then it just spontaneously materializes on Netflix or Disney Plus. But I think it really would fit for the Artemis Fowl books. Like, think about it. There's 8 books. You could probably get, like, let's say we're doing 30 to 40 minute episodes. We could get at least 2 episodes out of one book, maybe even 4. There's so much material in these books that really can be explored better with more time dedicated to each individual book. So I feel like that would have been a good option for this series in general. But hey, we have this movie. Let's go into what I would change about the movie that we have to make it the better movie that's in my brain. First and foremost, we are going to be faithful to the books. We might have to change a couple of things, but for the most part, we're going by the book. I know the book kind of ends off of a cliffhanger. Like, by the end of the first book, Artemis still hasn't found his dad, but we're just gonna go with it for now. First off, the narration. We are going to get rid of the mulch narration. It is annoying. I don't know why I said it like that. Annoying. It is irritating, annoying. I don't like it. Stop. Tell Mulch to hinge his jaw and be quiet. Stop talking. We're going to have Artemis do his narration. And we're going to do it in a way where it looks like he's typing on his computer and adding to his journal. You know, he's talking to us, but he's talking to his journal. I feel like that's a really good way to start off the movie, because it gives us a head start into, like, really seeing what his thought process is and him as a character. It's also a really handy thing to utilize, because he is talking to his journal, but we're also listening to his journal. So we're getting all this information, but it's not like a weird fourth wall break type of thing. Artemis can tell us about his idea about finding this fairy Bible. He can tell us how long it's been since he's last seen his dad. He can tell us about the trip he's on with Butler to try and locate this fairy Bible. I know they shot the scene where they obtained the fairy Bible and they didn't use it, probably because the test audiences were like, dang, this kid's a jerk. And like, yeah, he is, but we need that. We kind of need that. So yeah, sorry guys, we're gonna have to put that scene back in the movie. We can end off his journal entry with him saying something very cool and Artemis-y, like, this scheme is ridiculous and near impossible, but impossible is my middle name. I don't know what he would say, but it would be like a little bit cooler than that. Something very pompous and engaging, like, it really gets your attention and you're like, oh, what's this kid gonna do? Then we're basically going to go underground and see the events as told by the books on the screen for us. There will be no other girls in recon. There will just be Holly, and she will have to report to Commander Root, the male Commander Root. Do you see what I like? Taking away that whole plot just makes room for the absurd Aculus plot that they added into the movie, and we don't like that. We don't need that. So we're going to keep Holly's character arc as is. I really don't understand why they took this part out, and I hope it wasn't for the reason that, it was sexist, because that was the point. In the books, it was not saying, like, sexism is good. It was literally, like, condemning sexism by Holly being there and, like, fighting for herself and defending herself and standing up and saying, you know what, I have a right to be here. It's more powerful this way. We see Holly run into Mulch. She talks to Mulch for a few minutes, and she goes to Root, and then she goes to Foley, and they're like, okay, we're going to send you up there. And the part where she was talking to Foley in the movie, that was great. I loved that. That was actually funny, and it was one of the few parts in the movie where it's like, oh, we're actually doing something fun and interesting. Also, the scenes with Mulch were really good, with the exception of the interrogation scenes and the tunnel scene, which was accurate, but nobody wanted to see that anyway.
There are no words for me to adequately describe how much I detest that scene and how much I wish it did not exist. I can't get it out of my eyes. Also, it's feeding time? Who wrote this? I'm sorry, that was a lot. Please turn in your writer's license right now.
Holly goes up, she sees the troll, she sees that people are in danger, she steps in to try and help them out. Root tells her not to, but she does it anyway because this is Holly Short, people. Then Root and the other fairies, they come up and they realize, oh, Holly doesn't have any magic. And she's going to fly off to complete the magic restoring ritual instead of the weird subplot with her, like, getting in touch with her dad. They killed off her dad for some reason, and I don't think Holly's dad was dead in the books. I know her mom was. Maybe her dad was dead too, but we don't need that in this movie right now. Just have it the way it's written. It's better this way, trust me. Holly's at the tree to get her magic back, and she gets captured by Artemis and Butler. One thing that wasn't the biggest problem in the movie, but was kind of weird to me, was that they had Holly in, like, a cage, and in the books it was basically like she was in some super secure basement dungeon room, which I feel like works better because they basically just had this big cage just, like, in the middle of the house for some reason, and it just didn't look right to me. But we can keep it if that's going to be a problem. It's not the nail in the coffin for this movie, but it is just something weird that I always think about. We are going to have scenes where Artemis is talking to his mother. It will be very sad, and it will pull on the heartstrings of everyone watching in the audience, and we will start to sympathize with. This is very important. We need to see that although Artemis is not acting in a good way, that he does have some good intentions. He's not too far gone. The fact that they killed off his mom in the movie is actually really terrible because it takes away one of the really important pivotal parts, that was a lot of P's, where we see that he does have emotions, he does have a heart, and he does care about his family, and he does have some guilt. We see that he wants to be able to be close to his mom again, and because of her illness, he's not able to do that the way he once was. It's really important that we see that this character feels these things in order to relate to him. We really, really need to see that at one point he realizes how close fairies are to humans, and he feels really, really bad about kidnapping Holly. I'm not saying this to get Artemis off the hook. I'm just making a point that it's really important that we see that he does care about his family and that he does feel bad about what he's doing in certain parts of the movie. In order to really fight against that unlikable protagonist problem, we really need to play up his guilt. It is there in the first book, but we really need to play it up. We can have that scene where he's looking at his monitors and he's kind of starts to question what he's doing. We can have that, but to 11. We can have him sit there and just get nervous and be like, oh my gosh, what have I become? And then Butler can come into the room and, like, startle him. He can be like, oh, Butler, I didn't see you there, whatever, and try to regain his composure. And Butler can be like, what's wrong? And he can be like, no, it's fine. continue with the plan. This is basically all from the book. Like, the books are really good, guys. I think we need some more Foley scenes. They didn't really get a chance to ruin Foley for me, probably because he wasn't in that many scenes. But you know what? Let's add some more Foley scenes. I love Foley. We can have him like pop into Holly's earpiece and say funny, snarky things as he does. I think he has a conversation with Cudgeon in the books, and that could be a really good opportunity for some good Foley, Woody comeback type shenanigans. That would also do a better job of establishing who Cudgeon is and why he's a threat. Because when you're watching the movie, you kind of forget about him, and then he's just kind of there, and then he's causing issues, and then you're like, who is this guy? Does he have authority? Where did he come from? Like, I'm literally still confused about some of the Cudgeon scenes, especially when he's talking to Opal. Like, was he in jail? Was that his house? Like, I literally still have questions about that, and I've watched this movie so many times already. We are also just gonna take out the tunnel scene. We don't need that. I don't want to see that. If you want to read the tunnel scene, that's already bad enough. But nobody wants to see the tunnel scene. Thank you. We don't need to see that. We know what's going to happen. We can just see him dive into the dirt. That's good enough. Thank you so much. We can have a scene with Mulch talking to Root still. That would be really good. Mulch and Root, they're always talking and arguing, and that's always fun to watch. We love that. Also, side note, I really liked the scene with Mulch in the jail with the goblins. It was very accurate, and it was actually pretty funny. The troll fight in Fowl Manor is really strange to me because it's kind of boring for some reason. Like, it gets to a point where it's like, oh, are we still doing this? So, I don't know, maybe change that. Also, Butler is supposed to be fighting with the troll. He fights the troll, guys. And I feel like that would be way cooler than him, like, running away from the troll and then getting squashed by the troll. I also still don't really understand that whole thing where they blocked Holly's magic so she couldn't heal Butler in the movie. Like, it's not accurate. So in my movie, we're going to change it back to the way it was in the book. But I don't understand how they were able to block her personal magic. Like, they can block her neutrino, but I still don't get how they could block her own personal magic. And speaking of personal magic, we're going to have the scene where she smashes a hole in the floor and gets into the dirt and restores her magic, because that would be a really cool magical moment. That would be fun to watch. Also, I didn't mention this earlier, but it's on my mind now and it's bothering me. That scene where Butler is like fighting the little fairy elves with the neutrino that he took from Holly. It's no. Artemis needs to be in the house. No. Get in the house, Artemis. There's no way Butler would have let him do that. He has no coordination whatsoever. He needs to be watching from the monitors and like smirking or something and like steepling his fingers and being like, excellent, my plan is going to accordingly. I don't know. Then basically toward the end of the movie, we can have Artemis feel really bad and apologize to Holly. Holly is not going to accept the apology, and that is fine, and that makes a lot of sense, and she's going to say something snarky to him, and that's going to be cool, whatever. But he's still going to buy a wish from her, and then she's going to leave, and his mom is going to come down the stairs, and he's going to be like, oh, Mom, and then it's a happy Christmas movie again. Yay! I skipped so many details, even though it feels like I've been talking, like, forever. I skipped so many things in the movie and in the books. I didn't talk about the scene after the time freeze, when they come back in. And you know what? There is a slight issue there. In the books, the way they were able to escape that whole time thing was Artemis had Butler and Juliet be put to sleep, and also himself be put to sleep by, like, sleeping stuff that he put in their drinks, which were adult drinks. So that might pose a problem because Disney. So instead, we'll just have him give them all some melatonin gummies and not explain why. Problem solved. I am literally so smart. But like I said, I left a ton of stuff out, and that's okay. I did the important thing, which was restoring the book back into the movie. Also, interesting tidbit, the author of the Artemis Fowl books, he said he actually liked the movie. And I think it was just because, like, he was excited to see his characters on the screen. And I would be excited to see my characters on the screen too. So that makes a ton of sense. And, like, I respect that. But of course, I'm a snarky little fan. So I have to come over here and make this long video that who knows if anybody's going to watch. If you're watching this, thank you. Who knows if anybody's going to watch this. And I have to make this whole long video because I just love talking about this. This is probably going to be a beast to edit, and I will probably want to add like 200 more points in here, so that's going to be interesting. So, last editor's note, hopefully. I'm editing this video on May 29th. And it has come to my attention that Disney Plus has removed some of their content from the platform, including the Artemis Fowl movie. Now, I don't know if they just decided that that was an abomination and no one needed to see that anymore. But, like, what? Like, I was gonna fact check one of the things that I said about this movie, because I literally didn't believe myself because it was so ridiculous. It was the credit thing coming in 8 minutes into the movie. And I can't check because the movie's gone. This is insane. And I don't really know where I'm going to put this. And it's just kind of crazy. Like, I'm already coming out with a video like 2 or 3 years after the fact. And now this happens, which don't get me wrong. I'm still going to finish this video. I put way too much time into this. But, like, what are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Like, not that it's a good movie, but, like, this is crazy. It feels so strange that a platform can just remove its content like that. And it really shouldn't, because things come and go off of Netflix all the time, and I always hear people complaining about their show is off of Netflix now. But I think the thing that makes it so strange in this situation is that a lot of the titles that were removed, in fact, maybe all of them, were Disney Plus original content, which means you can't view them anywhere else. It would be like if Netflix took down Wednesday. Like, there's no other way to view this content. It's just so fascinating to me, and I don't know if I'm being dramatic, but in the future, if platforms take down their own original content, is this going to become like a form of lost media? Like, if I want to watch the Artemis Fowl movie, I literally cannot do that. It's gone. It's gone from the platform. Unless they release it in some other capacity, which who knows if they will, because it is not a popular movie by any means. But unless they release it in some other capacity, it's gone. It's essentially lost. Maybe I am being dramatic. It wouldn't be the first time, but it's just such an interesting thing to think about, especially as someone who is interested in Disney media, is interested in movies and all that sort of thing. It's just a really new idea. Not a new idea, but just something that I didn't see coming. I did not see them just up and taking down a bunch of their original content just overnight, seemingly.
But at last, I think we've reached the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching this long video about this movie that came out so long ago and is basically irrelevant. Thank you so much for listening to me ramble about this. I can't promise that I'll make more videos like this in the future, but I also can't promise that I won't. So stay tuned for that, maybe. No guarantees. And I'll see you in the next video. Stay random, and goodbye.